anaerobic foci. Then we have non-sporing bacilli. Okay, these non-sporing bacilli can again be further classified into gram-positive and gram-negative. Gram-positive bacilli include Bifidobacterium, Eubacterium, Propionibacterium, Lactobacillus, Actinomyces, Mobiluncus. Then gram-negative bacilli include Bacteroides, Prevotella, Porphyromonas, Fusobacterium, Leptotricha, and then we also have spirochetes like Treponema or Borrelia. Treponema, which is responsible for syphilis, and Borrelia, which causes some other diseases like recurrent relapsing fever and all those things. So these spirochetes are also strict anaerobes. We are discussing only the bacteria which are important from human infection point of view. There are large number of anaerobes which are present in the environment, but we are discussing largely the organisms which are important for human infections. Then in sporing gram-positive bacilli, we have only one genera, which is Clostridium, and Clostridioides. Clostridium difficile is now renamed as Clostridioides. So that is one change that has been introduced. So sporing bacilli are mostly gram-positive, and they belong to this genus, that is Clostridium, including Clostridium tetani, Clostridium botulinum, Clostridium septicum, Novia, Perfringens, Histolyticum, and many more. Okay, so these are capable of causing very important diseases like tetanus, like food poisoning, gas gangrene, and many other things. Okay, so these will be discussed in subsequent classes. So this is the basic classification of anaerobic bacteria, and very frequently you are asked to enumerate or classify anaerobic bacteria. So you must be remembering the examples of gram-positive and gram-negative foci and gram-positive and gram-negative bacilli, and which ones are the sporing bacilli. All right. So in talking about human infections, these anaerobic bacteria can originate either endogenously or exogenously. So endogenous, by this term we mean the bacteria which are a part of indigenous microflora of human beings. So usually under normal circumstances they are not causing infection, but as a result of some trauma or some immunocompromised situation, these bacteria, they gain access in sites that they are not supposed to be present. Okay. And then there are exogenous anaerobes like Clostridium botulinum, Clostridium tetani, which are present in the soil or in food items or in the environment, and they are not part of the normal flora. So endogenous anaerobic infections are as a result of bacteria which are normal flora, and they gain access to normally sterile body sites. And exogenous anaerobes are bacteria which are present in the environment or soil. Okay, so endogenous anaerobes, they are actually more in number as compared to the aerobes, outnumbering them in the ratio of 10:1 to up to 1000:1. So anaerobes are by sheer number, they are outnumbering the aerobes in the body, and they have preferences for the sites where they are able to grow, and these sites have low oxygen tension. Okay, and such sites include, I will be showing in subsequent slides, sites like intestine, genitourinary tract, oral cavity, and similar sites which have relatively lower oxygen concentrations. So this slide shows the indigenous anaerobic bacterial flora. So the common sites which are inhabited by anaerobes include oral cavity and upper respiratory tract, gastrointestinal system, gastrointestinal tract, female genital tract, urethra of male and female, and even the skin. So in the oral cavity, these bacteria are basically present between the crevices, between the joints of the gums and the teeth, and in the crevices between the teeth, where the oxygen concentration is relatively less. Okay, in GIT, they are present in huge amounts, and outnumbering the aerobic bacteria. But on the skin, as you can see, we have Leptostreptococcus and Propionibacterium, which are common anaerobes, which are relatively less strict for their survivability in oxygen. So these are various bacterial flora, anaerobic bacteria, which are able to colonize the various body sites. Okay, so again, like I told you, they are present in huge number in the gut, and towards the end of the gut, that means colon and appendix, the total number of bacteria may be 10 to power 9 to 10 to power 12, and ratio of anaerobes to aerobes in the distal colon, it may be as high as 1000:1. So these anaerobes, when present as normal commensals, they also have an important role to play. It is not that they're always there to cause some disease. So they also have a role to play in normal host physiology. They colonize human body in great numbers, and they play an important role to stabilize the resident bacterial flora. They prevent colonization and infection by the pathogens by bacterial interference through elaboration of toxic metabolites, lowering the pH, and depletion of nutrients. And they also interfere with adhesion of the pathogenic organisms to the epithelial surfaces. Specific bacteria like Bacteroides fragilis, they help in synthesizing of vitamin K, and other bacteria like Lactobacillus, it also helps in keeping the pH low. So presence of Lactobacillus in female genital tract in the vaginal cavity helps in preventing infections due to other bacteria like Candida, and prevents other diseases like bacterial vaginosis. So these anaerobes, when present in the normal sites, act as can be useful also. All right. So anaerobic infections in human beings are mostly polymicrobial. That means they are caused by multiple bacteria, multiple types of bacteria together. So generally, one particular site may be infected by more than one anaerobe or aerobe or facultative anaerobe. So they are typically polymicrobial infection, because the endogenous infection where these bacteria are present are containing large number of species. Different species are there which are colonizing these bacteria, these sites, and when there is some trauma in which the bacteria can be released into normally sterile sites, not only anaerobes but aerobes also escape and infect newer sites. So mode of infection of anaerobic bacteria. So like I told you, it can be endogenous or exogenous. Endogenous bacteria, they can gain access to normally sterile sites due to compromised anatomical barrier, such as following tooth extraction, any oral or GIT or genitourinary tract surgery, or accidental trauma, tissue necrosis, impaired circulation, hematoma formation, or presence of foreign body. All these things which can break down the normal anatomical barrier and create conditions which can produce local, which can reduce the local oxygen tension in the tissue, can facilitate the normal flora becoming infectious. Then aspiration of oral contents into lungs after vomiting, or in patients who are comatose. Altered defense mechanisms such as malignancies, diabetes, immunosuppressives, prolonged aminoglycosides, because aminoglycosides, if you remember, they are antibiotics which are exclusively acting against the aerobic infection. Okay, so they're not at all active against anaerobes. So if a person is on prolonged aminoglycoside, then it can predispose to anaerobic infections. Then exogenous mode of infection can be either due to contamination of wound with soil or puncture by objects, contaminated with various toxigenic Clostridium species or any other anaerobic bacteria. So this happens most frequently following road traffic accidents, in which, or bullet wound injury, warfare, in which the person is getting infected by some sort of foreign body, or there is contamination of the wounds with soil or dirt. Then ingestion of preformed toxins in food items such as vegetables or meat can lead to food poisoning by Clostridium botulinum typically, and also by Clostridium perfringens. Then person-to-person spread is also possible for some of the anaerobes, such as Clostridium difficile, which is causing diarrhea, particularly in admitted patients who are on prolonged antibiotic therapy. So Clostridium difficile causes antibiotic-associated diarrhea, or by bite wounds caused by human bites or animal bites, which can implant various endogenous oral flora into the soft tissue. All right. So these are the various sites where common anaerobic infections are seen, like brain abscess, chronic otitis, mastocytitis, sinusitis, thrombophlebitis, oral dental infections, pneumonia, peritonitis. Peritonitis is particularly common after abdominal surgeries or any injury to the abdomen, which releases the gut content into the peritoneal cavity. Diverticular abscess, genital infections like pelvic inflammatory disease and endometritis in females, decubitus and foot ulcers, gangrenes, all these things are typical of anaerobic infections. So some of the common endogenous anaerobic infections and their common bacteria are abscess of any organ can occur if the local anaerobic flora gains access, bacteremia, dental and periodontal infections, root canal infections, root canal of the tooth, neck space infections caused by various species of Bacteroides, Fusobacterium, actinomyces, which typically causes lumpy jaw or the abscess or abscess of sinus discharge of jaw. Then thoracic infections are caused by various anaerobic bacteria like Porphyromonas, Fusobacterium, Prevotella. Okay. Then endocarditis, abdominal infection, like I told you, peritoneal infections or peritonitis are very common. Then antibiotic-associated diarrhea caused by Clostridium difficile, pelvic and vulvovaginal abscess or pelvic inflammatory disease can occur, particularly following any manipulation with the female genital tract, such as abortion, septic abortion, in which adequate care has not been taken, actinomycosis, which resembles mycetoma, and it causes infection of the soft tissue and the bony tissue, and various forms of skin and soft tissue infections. All of these are examples of endogenous anaerobic infections. Then exogenous anaerobic infections, they include gas gangrene and crepitant cellulitis, gastroenteritis, tetanus, various forms of botulinism like foodborne botulinism, infant botulinism, wound botulinism. All these things would be taught to you in subsequent lectures. Nosocomial diarrhea, septic abortion. Septic abortion can be both exogenous and endogenous because depending upon the source of bacteria. Then infections following human or animal bites, hospital-acquired pneumonia or community-acquired pneumonia can be examples of exogenous anaerobic infections. Then what are the clinical clues to anaerobic infection? Okay, when do you suspect that probably a patient is suffering from anaerobic infection, and it is less likely to be because of aerobe or facultative aerobe? If the pus is characteristically putrid, or putrid means fermented or degraded kind of pus, there is severe nauseating foul odor from the specimen, and location of infection is in proximity to a mucosal surface, which indicates that probably the aerobes from the mucosal cavity have invaded into the soft tissue. And if there is a history of road traffic accident or bullet wound, warfare, or similar history which are suggestive of accessibility of the anaerobic bacteria to the normally sterile sites. Infection secondary to human or animal bite, large quantity of gas which is felt like crepitus, particularly seen in gas gangrene caused due to Clostridium species, typically Clostridium perfringens. Then prior therapy with aminoglycosides, blackish discoloration of the wound, and these exudates may sometimes fluoresce red under ultraviolet light, particularly seen in some gram-negative anaerobes which are pigmented. Then presence of sulfur granules in the discharge may indicate actinomycosis or infection due to actinomyces. So these are certain clinical clues to anaerobic infection. Now coming to the lab diagnosis of anaerobic infections. Anaerobic infections की lab diagnosis is not easy because of various factors. These anaerobes are generally present in mixture along with various other bacteria like facultative anaerobes or aerobes, and even there may be multiple anaerobes in a particular abscess or any particular specimen that has been received in the lab. So it becomes important to be able to identify each one of them and to be able to separate individual bacteria. So that is a difficult task. And being a ubiquitous member of the normal flora, they contaminate the clinical samples. ठीक है, जब भी हम क्लिनिकल सैंपल ले रहे होंगे तो इट इज पॉसिबल कि नॉर्मल फ्लोरा भी साथ आ जाए, which would lead to contamination of the sample, and it becomes difficult to determine whether this anaerobic bacteria is actually responsible for the infection or whether it is a part of normal flora. Hence, collection of specimens should be in the most sterile manner as possible. Then they grow relatively slower, and they differ widely in the degree of anaerobiosis that is required, and proper sample collection and transportation for anaerobic infections is very important, as we will discuss later. Then lack of standardized practices for creating anaerobic environment in the laboratories in the past, but these situations have improved in the recent time, but still they are not well available, or their availability is still restricted in many of the labs. Only in medical colleges or in high-end laboratories are anaerobic facilities available. In routine primary or tertiary care hospitals, anaerobic facilities are rarely available. So specimen collection, whenever you are suspecting anaerobic infection, utmost care has to be taken to avoid contamination with the normal flora. Okay, because once it is contaminated with the normal flora, you will never be able to tell whether this bacteria is a normal part of normal flora or whether it is actually causing infection. And another important aspect of specimen collection is that you must at any cost avoid exposure to the oxygen. Okay. So in general, the specimens or the sites of body which are routinely in contact with air are not preferred samples for anaerobic culture. Okay, so we have an entire list of samples which are not suitable for anaerobic culture, and a list of samples which have to be collected if you want to diagnose an anaerobic infection. Okay, so from oral cavity or upper respiratory tract, any sort of swab like throat swab, nasopharyngeal swab are generally not collected for anaerobic, because these swabs have already been exposed to oxygen and it is likely कि जो भी anaerobe होगा, it must have died. Okay, so instead, if there is an abscess, you aspirate the abscess or take biopsy without contamination of the saliva or any secretion. For respiratory, again, sputum or nasotracheal or endotracheal sections or washings are not acceptable, because again they have been exposed to oxygen. Instead, samples like pleural fluid collected by thoracocentesis or percutaneously collected transtracheal aspirate, or bronchial washings which have been obtained with uh, plugged catheter, which doesn't expose the sample to oxygen, or lung biopsy. Then for GIT infections, stool sample or rectal swab is never taken for anaerobic culture, because as you know, stool is full of anaerobic bacteria. Only one condition, in only one condition is stool taken for anaerobic culture, and that is for diagnosis of Clostridium difficile. Okay, so this is the only condition in which stool may be accepted for anaerobic culture if you are suspecting Clostridium difficile. Then for peritoneal peritonitis or peritoneal abscess, aspiration has to be done. Again, for genitourinary tract infection, any sort of swab is not preferred, and urine, either voided urine or urine that has collected in the urine bag connected to catheter, that is not preferred. So instead, endometrial biopsy or aspirates have to be collected, and if urine has to be cultured, then it has to be obtained through suprapubic aspiration. Then swabs on skin are not preferred. Instead, if there is suspected skin or soft tissue infection by anaerobic bacteria, then you have to debride the tissue and collect either the sulfur granules exuding from the pus from the tissue, or take tissue biopsy. Okay, so these are the samples which are not to be collected and which are suitable for anaerobic conditions. Okay, then another very important aspect is specimen transport. Okay, because again, specimen collection is one thing, and how it is transported is also important for anaerobic bacteria, because during transport, again, you have to protect the sample from oxygen throughout. Okay, so after specimen collection, it is crucial to protect the sample from oxygen until it can be processed in the lab. And aspirated material should not be transported in a syringe with recapped needle. Okay? If we have certain transport vials and transport media for anaerobic samples, but they are not available always in all the labs. So although not an ideal method, but sometimes specimen is collected in a syringe, and the syringe is plunged into a rubber cock and sent to the lab to prevent any exposure to the oxygen. Or they can be filled into small bottles with airtight caps, and the sample should be filled till the top, again to avoid the exposure to oxygen. But these are not ideal methods, and we have better transport media available, which can be or must be used. So these transport methods include various anaerobic transport vials, which contain media pras is pre-reduced anaerobic sterile media. Pre-reduced anaerobic sterile media. Also, they contain some indicator which would turn which would change their color if they have been exposed to oxygen. Okay, so these vials are present. Various forms of vials are present in which the sample can be added and transported to the lab. Then we also have some sealable plastic bags in which the sample can be kept, or in which culture plate which has been on which the sample has been applied can be kept. Okay, so generally what happens is key culture plate can be sent to the lab, and at the patient's bedside, the culture plates can be streaked with the patient's sample, and they can be put in these transport bags, and the culture plates themselves can be transported to the laboratories then. Then swabs, although not an ideal method, but sometimes situations arise that only swab can be collected. So in those situations, soft agar deeps can be used to protect the sample from oxygen, or special containers or special vials are available which have two tubes, okay, and a plunger. So the swab is inserted through this end, and when it goes into the outer tube, it contains a gel and or reduced environment. So these are various forms of transport for anaerobic media, for anaerobic samples. When received in the laboratory, first step is to observe it grossly. The sample is observed for blood, presence of necrotic tissue, foul odor, presence of sulfur granules, then microscopic examination by gram staining, and if the bacteria is sporing or non-sporing, that can be determined by special methods like Schaefer and Fulton's method for staining the endospore or the spore of the bacteria. So like I told you earlier, most of these infections are polymicrobial in nature. So in gram stain, you are more likely to see multiple forms of bacteria. Okay, you over here, like you are seeing gram negative rods, gram positive rods, you are seeing gram positive foci in clusters, you are seeing uh, sporing gram positive bacilli. So various forms of bacteria are seen very frequently in suspected anaerobic infection. Then this is Schaefer and Fulton's method for for staining the spores, and you can see these enlarged bulging ends. They are spores. Okay, they are stained green by malachite green, while the rest of the bacteria is stained pink or red by saffron. Okay, so this is endospore or spore staining method. Then what is the routine culture media that is used? Very commonly we use non-selective solid media, which is blood agar, okay, that is enriched with hemin and vitamin K, which provide nutrition as well as help to keep the reducing potential low. Then for mixed infections, we can use selective agar, which contains certain antibiotics, which would inhibit only the aerobic or facultative aerobic bacteria like kanamycin, vancomycin, blood agar plate. Okay, and then we also have Robertson cooked meat broth, which is a liquid or broth basically, and it contains pieces of minced cooked meat. Okay, so basically it is a broth that contains fat-free minced cooked meat. Okay, and it is overlaid with a layer of sterile liquid paraffin. So basically it acts as an anaerobic culture media because the unsaturated fatty acids which are present in the meat take up the oxygen, and this reaction is catalyzed by hematin which is present in the meat, and there are also glutathione and other sulfur containing amino acids which keep it reduced. It permits the growth of all the anaerobes, and it turns black if the bacteria is proteolytic, and it turns pink if the bacteria is saccharolytic. So it can indicate proteolytic or saccharolytic activity of the Clostridium. All right. So I will show you a photograph of Robertson cooked meat broth in subsequent slides, or it would be discussed in the small group discussion that we will be having. Okay, then we have various types of selective media for various specific bacteria, which include various antibiotics and various enrichments. Okay, you don't need to remember that, but more importantly, you have to know about the techniques, the anaerobic culture techniques, which are used to create anaerobic environment in the laboratory so that these strict anaerobic bacteria can grow in the lab. Okay, so previously, traditionally, there were some methods which were available, but none of these methods were very good because they always left behind certain amount of oxygen, and they were also cumbersome and not standardized methods. Okay, so initially they tried various methods like creating a vacuum, okay, creating a complete vacuum in a jar in which the culture plates were kept, but every time some amount of oxygen would be left, complete vacuum could not be created, and since the pressure reduced so much, the culture media it kind of bubbled out, and the media also detached because of low pressure, hence it is not used. Then they came up with candle jar method, in which an enclosed, this is a candle jar on the right side, in which It is a glass container in which a candle is placed, which is lit, and as the candle burns, it uses the oxygen and it reduces the concentration of oxygen and increases carbon dioxide. But again, it doesn't replace the oxygen completely, and hence it is not a method for anaerobic culture. Candle jars are now used only for bacteria which are capnophilic. That means which require high concentration of carbon dioxide. Okay, they are not adequate for anaerobic culture. Then various chemicals or biological methods were employed to absorb the oxygen, like chemically, use of alkaline pyrogalol and various other chemicals were used. Biologically, uh, anaerobic bacteria were cultured along with strict aerobic bacteria. So it was believed that aerobic bacteria would take up the oxygen and reduce the oxygen in the jar. Because germinating seeds and chopped vegetables which would take up the oxygen, but all these things did not work out adequately. But now we have well-defined techniques to create anaerobic environment in the laboratory, and these techniques include Macintosh Wildes anaerobic jar. This technique was developed. It was one of the initial techniques to be developed, but nowadays we have still better techniques. Okay, so this jar is although not very frequently used. We have better techniques now available, but you must know about Macintosh Wildes anaerobic jar. So it works on the principle of evacuation and replacement. So as you can see, it has got two outlets, one on either end. Okay, so the outlet is connected by a vacuum pump and inlet is connected to hydrogen gas supply. And then electric terminals are there which are connected to a catalyst, which is palladinized asbestos, which is heated as the current is passed. And the purpose of this catalyst is that it would form water. Okay, remaining oxygen which is present after pumping vacuum, after pumping oxygen outside and hydrogen inside, would react with hydrogen and it would produce water to create complete anaerobiosis. ठीक है, but there was danger कि hydrogen हम use कर रहे हैं and oxygen is also present and we are heating it. So there was danger कि it might explode because of this hydrogen is highly inflammable. So nowadays they are using alumina pellets which are coated with palladium in a gauze sachet and suspended. So it is working at room temperature. So there's no need to heat. Okay, so the second method is an exomat, and this is a modification of the same method. This is also based on evacuation and replacement. So it is a fully automated system in which 2 or 3 cylinders are there containing different types of gases, and this machine is there from which tubes are coming out which connect into individual jars in which the culture plates are kept. Okay, so these tubes, they create a vacuum and they inject uh, anaerobic the gases which are responsible for creating anaerobiosis, having low concentration of oxygen and higher concentration of nitrogen, hydrogen and carbon dioxide. Okay, so this happens 3 times. Eventually complete anaerobiosis is achieved inside these jars. Okay, so this is an automated method. We have this method in our laboratories, the Enoxomat. And another method is gas pack. So gas pack is basically a sachet. It comes in a foil kind of sachet. So you open this sachet, place it in a jar along with culture plates. Okay, and when you add water to this sachet, the chemical reaction occurs which absorbs oxygen and releases carbon dioxide and hydrogen. Okay, so this is called gas pack. This is an example of the photograph of a gas pack. So these are the various chemical reactions that take place inside the gas pack. Another method are plastic anaerobic bags or pouches. So these are pouches to hold fewer number of plates, and they again have something inside them which creates anaerobic environment. Okay, these are again the anaerobic bags or pouches. Then this is a relatively older technique, rolled tube technique, which was developed by a scientist, Hungate. Okay, this technique basically includes use of tubes. These tubes are there, in which anaerobic gases are flowing, gases which are rich in carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and hydrogen, and they lack oxygen. And this person is working with anaerobic bacteria because the tube that is coming is bringing these anaerobic gases. So inside the tube, these gases create an anaerobic environment, and you can work within this tube. Okay? So the gases are constantly flowing, and the tube is open. So this is Hungate technique or the roll tube technique, very rarely used nowadays. Okay, so these anaerobic chambers or glove boxes are the latest and most sophisticated equipment for anaerobic culture. So these are enclosed chambers or huge boxes, okay, which are completely enclosed. I mean, there is no contact with the outside air. Okay, and inside there is anaerobic environment. So when a person has to work with some cultures, it can be passed through side doors. The sample and the culture plates are passed through side doors without hampering the anaerobic environment inside. And person puts his or her hands through these openings, which are kind of sealed. Okay. So the person can work inside them, and the plates can be incubated inside these glove box itself. So this is basically a whole cabinet which is completely anaerobic inside. So inside the anaerobic chamber, there is 5 to 10% hydrogen, 5 to 10% carbon dioxide, and 85 to 90% nitrogen. So basically it creates an anaerobic environment inside the anaerobic chamber as well. All right. So these are the various methods for laboratory diagnosis of anaerobic infections. So we discussed about various types of anaerobic bacteria, how they are classified, examples, clinical features of these anaerobic bacteria, what is the mode of infection of endogenous and exogenous bacteria, specimen collection, and laboratory diagnosis of anaerobic bacteria. And so in subsequent classes, you would be taught about individual anaerobic bacteria, maybe in next 3 or 4 lectures, 2 or 3 lectures maybe. The important anaerobic bacteria would be covered. So thank you. Any questions? Any questions you can ask me, or you will also have a small group discussion on anaerobic techniques. You can ask them then also. Spore forming anaerobes are gram positive, mostly belonging to Clostridium species. Okay, and the tube anaerobic technique, the Hungate technique that I was talking about, that is not very frequently used. It was used previously, but in this photograph you can appreciate that there are several tubes which are carrying anaerobic gases, gases which lack oxygen. And when they are flowing inside this enclosed container, they would replace the gas which is present inside it, and they would fill this tube or this flask or whatever equipment person is working with the anaerobic gases. Okay, so that is the only principle, nothing much. So this is the Hungate method. All right, thank you.